Hello, sentient beings. Welcome to the Spiritual Alchemist channel with me, your host, Marvin. Well, today's segment on the ingredients of well-being focuses on the shadow. So we've often heard things like the shadow self, and I'd like to rephrase that as to being the shadow I, because the shadow I, meaning with a capital I, that is what segregates or separates. And know that, all the things that we don't want to be or don't want to discover within ourselves or that we don't want to live out and we don't want to admit into our, identification go to make up our shadow. So we're rejecting one half of all the possibilities, far from causing them to disappear, but we're merely banishing them from the conscious mind of the I identification. So if we say no, we've banished one of the poles from sight. So often I talk about the polarities and that how we want to stay in balance, but what we've actually failed to do is actually to get rid of it. Therefore, we've rejected the pole. This pole will live on in the shadows of our consciousness. So this is something that we definitely should be aware of. Like, imagining when we were small kids, when we were either trying magic on, ourselves or someone else, or trying to make ourselves invisible by closing our eyes. And then when we become that adult, we imagine that we've gotten rid of some or a part of ourselves that we probably didn't like. And so one pole, that could be the pole that we might consider, let's say, for example, let's say attractiveness, for example. This then stays in the limelight of our consciousness, while then the opposite pole of not being attractive, it stays in the dark, where of course nobody could see it. So we want to maybe hide our true self through things like makeup and other things, different clothing and so forth, to hide that true person or that true being. So you might know that term as well. It's very famous, out of sight, out of mind. But it's really not out of mind. It's really just hidden. So then the shadow, that is our greatest threat, because it's always there, even though we don't want it known or we want to recognize it. It's the shadow that sees to it that all of our efforts and purposes eventually turn into their opposites. So all those contents that emerge from our shadow, we project onto some, anonymous thing that we might want to call evil in the world, or that it's just out there. It's not a part of who I am, because we are afraid to discover within ourselves the true source of all that might be considered unholy, if you will. However, when we refuse to get, to grips or come to terms to what this one part of reality and live it out for its real preciseness, that ensures that we never get what we hope for. And then, reject those aspects of reality. They force us, to devote ourselves to them, more intensively, actually. So this process takes place mainly, via like projection. For once, we've rejected and repressed any given principle within ourselves, it continually generates that fear and rejection in us all over again whenever we encounter it in the world of where we're saying it's not part of us, but that world out there. And then we say, oh, that person has rejected us, but in turn, we've rejected ourselves. So then the law of resonance states that, we can only ever come into contact with that which we ourselves resonate. We might hear that term as well, take only what resonates with you. Well, that is going to be that, because often we will just shut down which does not resonate with us. So the inevitable conclusion that the outer world and the inner world are identical. So just imagine as well a large body of water like an ocean, and you're throwing a rock into that ocean. The ocean doesn't throw the rock back out to you. It encompasses, it caresses that rock, and it brings it along with it as being part of itself, where it does not reject. So if we think about, the equivalence of inner and outer worlds, or of, humanity and our cosmos, it's all wrapped into, the expressions of that, our microcosmos. It's the same as our macrocosmos. And there is not that separation, really. And that the I is responsible for splitting apart the whole of existence. So that I constitutes a you, which is experienced as being, a part of being distant out there. But if the shadow consists of all of those principles that the I has refused to integrate, then in the last resort, the shadow and whatever is out there are one and the same. We always experience our shadow as being sort of like not part of us, or being out there, for the simple reason that if we were to recognize it within ourselves, it would no longer be our shadow, now would it? And what we consider ourselves with most is what we do not want. It is because of this law that, children later take up the very behaviors that they most hated in their parents. And sounds ironic, but often true. So it should also start to become clear to us that there is in reality no outer world that is, molding us or influencing us or making us ill. Instead, it's the outer world acts as that mirror, in which all that we ever see is ourselves, and in particular our shadow, to which we are, otherwise inwardly blind. Just as we can, only see a smart part of our own physical body by looking at ourselves, and we need that reflection in a mirror to see the many aspects that, otherwise are invisible to us. So for instance, like, maybe the shape of my face, my back, or the color of my eyes, the true color of my eyes. So in just the same way, we are particularly blind to our own psyche and are capable of recognizing the part of it that is invisible to us, which is the shadow, only via that projection and reflection in that supposed environment or outer world. So recognition, in short, depends on that polarity. So recognition, itself in the mirror. We want to recognize ourselves in that mirror. Otherwise, it's just going to amount to illusion. So if I look at, my beautiful brown eyes in the mirror without realizing that it is my own eyes that I'm looking at, then it's that illusion rather than the recognition. So if we're inhabiting the world without recognizing that, everything we preserve or we perceive and experience is none other than ourselves, then we're entangled in that web of deception and illusion. So sometimes that illusion seems really genuine, and yet, it should not be forgotten that that dream too seems just as genuine and real while we're in it. But then when we wake up, we realize that, hey, that was only a dream. And that goes the same with our everyday existence. So the shadow fills us with that fear. So that's what we need to look at. The shadow contains everything that the world, or our world, most needs for its salvation and for that purification. The shadow makes us ill or unwell because it is the very thing that is lacking for our well-being. So we need to trust ourselves to delve into the reason for the cause of our wounds. It's the shadow that makes us ill, but the encounter with the shadow that makes us well again. It is that symptom that we live out what we are refusing to live out on the conscious level through the medium of this body. The symptom makes us whole again. So the symptom shows in that stark reality what is that, the patient's lacking. For the symptom itself is the missing principle, now revealed within that body in material visible form. So no wonder we dislike the symptoms when it is they that force us to express those very principles that we are most intent on not living out. And so it is that we set out on our struggle against symptoms, totally ignoring the opportunity they offer us to use symptoms as tools of purification. The soul then, not the soul, but the shadow then will make us dishonest. We always imagine, that we're merely the way we identify ourselves or merely the way we see ourselves. It is this form of self-evaluation that is meant here by, being dishonest. And used here, always significant, can't even say it, signifies, dishonesty towards ourselves, and, not any kind of, being deceitful or anything like that. So all the deceptions of this world are relatively harmless compared to the ones that we inflict on ourselves our whole life long. So honesty toward ourselves is one of the toughest challenges that we can face. And, searching for that truth. And self-knowledge means discovering not the I, but the self. For the self is all-embracing, while the I, through its tendency to divide and, define or judge, constantly, prevents us from knowing the whole that the self is. So for those of us, on the other hand, who are prepared to strive to be more honest with ourselves, that illness or disease can turn into a marvelous, thing along the way. For, that illness makes us honest. And the symptoms of the illness, we live out clearly and visibly everything that we are so keen to drive, far from us, and so remove from sight. Again, that illness makes us honest, unmasking those deep aspects of the psyche, that we've long kept hidden. So this involuntary honesty is presumably also the basis for the sympathy and the devotion that people feel towards those who are ill. Honesty makes them kind. For an illness, we become as we truly are. Illness compensates for all our imbalances and brings us back to our midpoint. So that point of being balanced. So honesty has its own beauty, something of which can be seen in those who are ill. So thinking about it, every decision splits that polarity into an accepted and a rejected pole. So the accepted aspect is translated into behavior and so integrated at the conscious level. And that rejected pole then is thrown away to the shadows and compels our, further attention by apparently coming back, from somewhere out there. And the illness is a specific and very common expression of that general rule. So, under the terms of it, the aspects of the shadows are precipitated into the bodily form, where they are then shown as symptoms through the medium of the body. The symptoms makes us honest and making visible that which we have repressed. So take this within, that the whole of creation exists within you, and everything that is within you also exists within creation. Continue to stay divine, sending you a lot of love, light. Share this video with those that you might think it might assist on their journey to finding their true selves and love and light and happiness.